No? Okay. More and more lonely. So, I'll tell you what it says. To be without a reference point is the ultimate loneliness. It's also called enlightenment. What it's saying here is that we're looking for a reference point. Now, this is me. So the ego, the self. But we're going to remove that ego, that self. And then to completely have no reference point, nothing to refer to, we could call enlightenment. So in the middle way, there's no reference point. The middle way is the first teaching the Buddha gave when he said, no extreme, no non-existence, no true existence, the middle way. And then in the middle way, there is no reference point. The mind with no reference point doesn't resolve itself, doesn't fixate, and doesn't grasp. Did you want me to stop now? Are you gripping your seats? Because it's taking everything away from you, right? It's saying that mind can't find the solution. You posit a solution, and then you look for the solution. And this is samsara, how we continue within samsara. But here it's saying that mind is not creating a point, a reference point, a point that says this is who I am, doesn't create one, doesn't try to fix it because it doesn't exist, doesn't fixate on that me, that self, that I, and doesn't grasp at it. So then we have to start asking ourselves how we cannot have a reference point, a me, an I. How is it possible? It means we have to change a deep-seated habitual response to the world, wanting to make it work out one way or the other. So our DNA, our deep-seated response to the world, is that we see problems and then we fix the problems. Who's fixing, or what's fixing? The ego, the self. So now it's saying, there is no self, there is no ego, therefore for me there is no problem to be fixed. But then it goes further than that, saying, then if I can't go left and I can't go right, because there's no need to go left and there's no need to go right, then I feel like I'm going to die. When we don't go left or right, we feel like we're in a detox center. We're alone, cold turkey, with the edginess that we've been trying to avoid by going left or right. And then, how does that edginess feel? When you're detoxing from the I, from the self, how does it feel? It doesn't feel comfortable because there's this DNA, the past habits of recreate the self. Because if you recreate the self, there's our point, our reference point, and from that reference point, we can create problems, and then the I can solve the problems, and then we'll just continue as we've been continuing for a long time with our habit. You understand? So what we're proposing is enlightenment, but enlightenment doesn't sound very cool in the sense of there's going to be a struggle, there's going to be a problem. And who's struggling? What's the problem? It's the self, the I, that's throwing up these problems, the dramas, the problems, the confusions, the angers, the jealousies. The I's throwing that up because it's grasping onto itself and cherishing itself, and then it makes a purpose. And the purpose is to have a problem and to fix the problem. So the problem is, should I go left or should I go right? And now I can't go left. We reach the paradox. I can't go left. I can't go right. What am I going to do? I could just sit. But that sounds dangerous. That sounds difficult. Wouldn't it be much better if we struggle with the decision to go left or right? Because that could take up a whole lot of time and a whole lot of thinking. And maybe we won't come to the conclusion sooner or later, but it'll keep me busy. And in that busyness, I'm creating karma. Because thoughts are appearing, aversions are appearing. I'd rather go left than right. Because I'm more attached to left than right. I have an aversion for right. You know, if we go that road, I don't like it so much. But there's a nice cafe. If I go left, I like that road, right? So you understand how the mind works. You know, in this, you can't go straight because there is no road straight, but you've only got left or right. And in that left or right, the mind's saying, well, I would rather go this way. I would rather avoid this way. The left is better. The right is more problematic. I'm a Dharma practitioner. I'm going to go right. Okay? So I've decided. I'm strong. I can do it. I'm going to go right, not left. I'm going to experience the difficulties. I'm going to face the problems. I don't like crowds, but along the way I know there's a place which is very crowded. I can deal with it. The ego says. There's a very busy cafe. I can deal with it. So I go right instead of going left. But the whole time I'm driving along that road, I'm thinking, should have gone left. Should have gone left. Left would have been much better. There's that cafe on the, if you go left, there's that cafe. The Bliss Cafe. So there's that struggle going on with the mind that's saying, you've made the wrong decision. Left or right, it didn't matter. But now you've decided it's the wrong decision, and you're struggling with the wrong decision, and you're wondering whether there's a shortcut back to the left road, or should you do a U-turn, do a U-in, go back? Is it too late to go back? So now the mind is struggling with the decision that you've made that you think is perhaps the wrong decision, but maybe I've gone too far to go back on the decision. So you're creating this whole drama in your mind, and this drama is being created by the ego. So years and years of going to the left or the right, going to yes or no, going to right or wrong, has not really changed anything, has it? When you think about your life and how we have all these decisions to make. Left, right. Yes, no. Like, dislike. Hasn't really changed anything. We're still struggling. We're still looking for security. And that security that we thought we would get from these decisions has only given us a temporary joy, a temporary pleasure, because it was an alleviation of suffering. It wasn't a true happiness. So if I'd gone left, my joy road, my happy road, going to the cafe that I like, the Bliss Cafe, it would have been a temporary alleviation of suffering. It wouldn't have been a real happiness, a real bliss, a real joy. So I was suffering. The cafe gave me temporary joy, temporary pleasure. And then from that pleasure, it starts to go down again. I start to head towards suffering again. And again, I start to look for another decision that will give me a little bit more joy, a little bit more happiness. But it's not long-term happiness, it's short-term alleviation of suffering. This short-term alleviation of suffering is what we do in samsara. It's the repeating karma that we keep doing over and over and over. The truth is the suffering because we're born from karma and delusion. Our operating system is karma and delusion. Not the positive karma, not the positive energies. We're talking about the negative. That karma and delusion produces the suffering. And then when the suffering manifests, we want to remove it. But what we've learned is, if I have chocolate, coffee, whatever it is, there's a temporary alleviation of the suffering, and then we start to slide down back towards the suffering, and then we do something again. And this has created this left or right, yes or no, good and bad. We've created a whole world around it that's become my world. I'm the reference point, and that reference point then has the view from there of what will make me temporarily happy and what I need to avoid. So this is what we've learned from over a long, long time. You understand? What don't you understand? Mind. Same. Yeah. Huh? I think I missed something. Tell me about the point that you start, where you start to measure. Yes. Is the ego. Yes. Had to have the reference point. Yeah. Yeah. And if they didn't have the reference point, then what? But we're all creating our reference points. Mind. But we've had that reference point from beginningless time. We pass on that DNA, that habit, to the next rebirth. And then as you're growing up, that reference point habit is already there. You don't need to be given it by your parents. You know, when you're born, you think you're born fresh, but you're born with all the baggage from past lives. The DNA and the karmic habits and the habituation and the ego from the past life. But now you're the continuity, but the body's different. It's a fresh body. And as you start to get a little bit bigger, your mother's saying to you, do you want, do you like, your name is, giving you reference points. But actually you're born with a reference point. It's a subtle reference point, but you're born with it because you've already got mind. You're going to have to sit with this. So the example given is when you're sitting in meditation and you feel pain and suffering, you move your legs and you think, oh, now I feel better. And a few minutes later, the pain comes back and you think, oh, pain's come back, I need to move my legs again. So the satisfaction that we get from moving, from the decisions of left or right, looking for pleasure, we keep moving around seeking pleasure, seeking comfort, and the satisfaction that we get from that movement is short-lived. So we hear a lot about the pain of samsara. We hear about liberation from samsara. Some people call nirvana. Some people call it enlightenment. But we hear about samsara, and we hear about, we could call it nirvana, enlightenment. But what we don't hear about is how painful it's going to be from being completely stuck to being completely unstuck. So the process of becoming unstuck requires bravery, incredible courage, because we're completely changing our way of perceiving reality as if we're changing our DNA. So up until now, from beginningless time, we've had our view of reality that we brought into this life. And so it's brought with us all these habits that produce me, I. So what we're looking at in order to not be in samsara is to unstuck or unstick ourselves from all these habits that are holding me as normal, ordinary, samsaric being. Because while I keep repeating these patterns, these habits, then I keep recreating or creating more karma, which I'm going to experience, which means I'm not going to be nirvana, I'm going to be samsara, on and on and on and on. So we need to undo a pattern that's not just my pattern, but it's a human pattern. We project onto the world a zillion possibilities of attaining resolution. We can have whiter teeth, weed-free lawns, strife-free world, a world without embarrassment. We can live happily ever after. We keep projecting onto the world what we want to make the world perfect. If I don't have any weeds in the lawn, life is perfect. If that horrible neighbor moved, life would be perfect, etc. This pattern that we keep projecting onto the world, that if that was adjusted, if that was improved, if that was changed, this dissatisfaction, this problem that I have within me would disappear. I'd be happy. But this pattern is keeping me dissatisfied and causes a lot of suffering because I keep looking externally at what could be changed, could be improved. And then in many cases, we can do it, like the lawn. You can buy poison and you can kill the weeds in the lawn. And then you discover you've killed many sentient beings along the way. Or that nice green grass looks beautiful, and I'm going to have to water it. And then the council will say to you, you can't water it. There's no water. And then you think, oh, my grass, what am I going to do? My grass is the most important thing in the world, that green grass. So while we're fixating on these external objects of happiness, those external objects are also impermanent in samsara, subject to change. So there's a problem, because we're looking for that outside to give me happiness, but what is outside is also changing, subject to decay, subject to impermanence. So as human beings, not only do we seek resolution, but we also feel we deserve resolution. Not only do we not deserve resolution, we suffer from resolution. We don't deserve resolution, we deserve something better than that. Not just to resolve the problems, but to live with bliss, to live with compassion, to live with love. Not just to resolve the problems, the weeds, the weather. We need to have more than that. So our birthright, what we're born with, the potential is the middle way. Because you have that Buddha potential. An open state of mind that can relax with paradox and ambiguity. Paradox and ambiguity. We don't know what to do. We don't know which way is right to go, left or right. We don't know what's going on around. And instead of very quickly going to, I must solve this, and I can't solve it on the cushion, so I need to do something in order to solve how I'm feeling internally, mentally. So it's a mental dissatisfaction that we're looking to fix through coffee, walking, sitting, watching TV, whatever it is. We're looking for external things, objects, phenomena, to solve something internal, a pattern of thinking. To the degree that we've been avoiding uncertainty, we're naturally going to have withdrawal symptoms. So if you've avoided uncertainty a lot, you're going to have withdrawal symptoms as you start to grapple with uncertainty. You start sitting with uncertainty. You allow uncertainty. You don't always need to make decisions to make things clear. You just sit. And then by just sitting, you start to notice how it's the ego that's throwing up the uncertainty. It's the ego that's creating the problem about uncertainty. It's the ego that's making you freak out about uncertainty. And so the path to enlightenment, what starts to withdraw you from uncertainty, makes you feel very uncomfortable. With withdrawal, there's always thinking there's a problem and that someone, somewhere, needs to fix it. So the ego produces a problem, and then it's looking for somebody to fix it. Whether I fix it, you fix it, society fixes it. But the ego will keep producing these problems over and over to keep us busy, because that's its habit of keeping us in samsara. So we say we want to go to nirvana, become enlightened, but in actual fact we're running away from it. Because the more we want to fix it, the more we're not experiencing the withdrawal from the need to fix it. We just need to sit. And when we sit, we feel the withdrawal. We feel how the mind starts wanting to create the grasping onto the ego, the cherishing of the ego, and then the ego wanting, the desire of the ego to manifest the solution for the problem. What we manifest as the solution to the problem is samsara. Because if you imagine, if the mind created perfection, the Buddha realm, which we do in the mandala offering, so we produce perfection, there's no dust, there's no dirt, there's no dishes, there's no beds to be made. What would I do? There'd be nothing to do. So then the mandala can make you feel uncomfortable, because within the mandala offering is perfection. There's just Dharma, just the sound of Dharma. And then your mind takes you back to the sound of drama. Could be a program, couldn't it? The sound of drama, not the sound of music, right? So the mind takes you back to the sound of drama, which is your own mind saying, there's beds to be made, I should be vacuuming the floor, I should be cleaning the kitchen, I should be going to work, I should be thinking about this, I should be thinking about that, which is all the distraction from the perfection. So within your mind is the seed of perfection. But we keep distracting ourselves from that seed of perfection because the habit, the DNA that we've created for such a long time, is to have the reference point of ego, and ego's job is ignorance, and the ignorance's job is to create confusion, and the confusion's job is to create dishes and floors to be clean, etc. And so we keep wanting to come back to this reference point, because then from the reference point, we know what to do, because we've been doing it for such a long time. So when you go into retreat, when you take a holiday from the ego, you leave the ego at the car park of the Dharma Center, and then you come up here and you think, oh, to be ego-free, it's so wonderful. And then you unpack the bags. And packed in the bags were all the tools of ego. And so then the ego starts to manifest. I think, in this place, it's possible to subdue the ego quite a lot, because you don't have problems with the food, you don't have problems with the place. Much easier in India to fight against the conditions, and then the ego arises, right? Often make a joke in India that there's a certain number of bathrooms and toilets, and you've got 90 people. So say 4 toilets and 90 people in the break, all rushing to the toilet, and inevitably you've got diarrhea in India, and so you need to go. So you often see people standing outside the toilet, sort of hopping up and down. Why are they in there before me? So then the ego can easily manifest when you're not feeling quite right, when the self-cherishing comes up strongly. I need to go to the bathroom. Then you can see the ego. But in this situation, it's a bit more difficult, a bit harder. But still, underlying is the ego that says, don't want to suffer, want to be happy, right? So there's your 2 directions, left and right. Don't want to suffer, want to be happy. And the ego is my reference point. And if I avoid this and I get this, we'll be okay. Trust me. From beginningless time, I've been taking care of you, and I've been sorting things out for you. Yes, I know there's some problems along the way. This was a disaster, this was a problem, this. I know there's some problems along the way, but on the whole, I'm quite a good friend to you. Ego, ignorance says. So from that ego, from that grasping of the ego, the cherishing of the ego, we don't want paradox. We don't want ambiguity. We want to know left or right. Which way is enlightenment? So you come to Dharma teachings, and you want to hear in Dharma teachings left or right. Which way is the Buddha? Do I go that way or that way? And hopefully you're going to go left because there's a nice cafe on the way, and then there's a nice view where I can take photographs, and then I'm going to end up in enlightenment, and we did it in a really nice way with a beautiful road, and this would be very comfortable, very easy. We can put the car on cruise control, have some nice mantras playing in the car, like that. So here it's saying, no left, no right, no answer. Just sit. And when you just sit, the desire arises, the anger can arise, the aversion can arise, all these different emotions can arise, because that's the habit, because you're not allowing me to do something. So the beginning of meditation is very much frustration, because you're not allowing me to do anything. All I can do is sit on the floor or sit on the chair and struggle. But then you learn struggling doesn't work. Because within the struggle, there's got to be a winner and a loser. And you're struggling with yourself, with your own ego. So we have to let go of the struggle. And then we just sit. And then the struggle becomes subtler, deeper, more refined. We become cleverer at removing the possibility of enlightenment. Because we're very clever Western people. We're absolutely determined to get to enlightenment the slowest way possible. We think we want to get there really quickly, but in actual fact, we're subverting ourselves. We're slowing ourselves down because we're constantly struggling with that ego. And now the ego becomes very subtle. And so you're sitting with the paradox, you're sitting with the ambiguity, you're just sitting, and it seems to be going quite well. Well, I never thought I could do this so well, but it's going well, you know. And then the legs start, and you think, oh, those legs, they're uncomfortable. If I just move them, I'll become enlightened. So you move them, and you sit again. Oh, that's not comfortable. I don't know why I did that. I should move back to the original posture. So you move again. And now, oh yes, that's better. The right foot out, left foot in, yes, that's better. And then if I adjust this a little bit and maybe put a little cushion under here, and okay, yes, that's getting, not bad. Oh, but the back is a little bit sore. And so I need to put this cushion up a little bit, and okay, yes, that's, and then you hear gong, meditation over. And you think, oh, but that session was good. You know, not so much manifest ego. Did you notice? There wasn't that me in it. It was really good. It was just, there was a little problem with the legs and the back, but that wasn't me. That was just the body. So it becomes subtler, deeper. So that's now what we need to look at. We looked at, the gross manifestation of the ego, the delusions, the 84,000 delusions, but just a few, how they manifest in society as fear, anxiety, sadness, depression. And then from there, how the angers start to arise, the hatreds start to arise, these other feelings start to arise from these energies. So, we go back to the middle way. The middle way is open. It's not closed in the sense of the middle way is not saying, I like, I don't like, I don't care. The middle way is open, balanced, having equanimity. But the middle way is tough going because it's going against the grain of an ancient neurotic pattern. I didn't say erotic, you New Zealanders. Ancient neurotic pattern that we all share. Great, it's an erotic pattern. When we feel lonely, when we feel hopeless, what we want to do is move to the right or the left. Lonely, hopeless. We want to move because we think by going to the right or going to the left, I'm going to be less lonely, less hopeless. We don't want to sit and feel what we're feeling. We don't want to go through the detox, the samsara detox. Yet the middle way encourages us to do just that. It encourages us to awaken to the bravery that exists in everyone without exception, including you and me. So we need this bravery of wanting to detox from the ego, from samsara, to just be able to sit and accept and observe and to let it go, instead of grasping, creating, resolving, fixing, which we've been doing for a long, long, long time. So meditation provides a way for us to train in the middle way by staying on the cushion. The big problem is this detox makes you feel you want to get off the cushion. You want to get away from what you're experiencing because you didn't expect to feel so horrible when you were doing meditation. You had this idea that meditation was going to be blissful. And so you sat down, perhaps in the beginning of meditation, when you first start meditating, you sit down thinking, this is going to be fantastic. It's going to be blissful. And you sit down, and then you think, this is horrible. Because I'm starting to see all the thoughts. Masses of thoughts are coming on and on and on. And that wasn't me before. So this is meditation. Many people have told me, meditation drives me crazy. When I'm not meditating, I'm very concentrated. But as soon as I meditate, it feels like I'm going crazy. So it must be meditation. And I say to them, well, the reality is it's you. And you're just not noticing all of this stuff going on and on and on. And some of it you grasp onto and you want, and some of it you don't like, so you have aversion for it. And sometimes it propels you to the fridge to get something in the fridge, or to the cupboard, and you take something from the cupboard. But many thoughts produce many actions. So when we sit right down on the spot, on the cushion, we start to see so much that now we think we have to resolve. It gives us another job. So now meditation became a job. So I think now life is worse than it was before meditation, because now life became busier. Now you've seen the problem, the mind, your mind, with all of these thoughts, and now I need to fix, resolve all of these thoughts. And then you think, oh, it's going to take a lifetime or more. You know, how can I fix all of these thoughts? Then the struggle begins. The wrestling begins. So once you start wrestling with your thoughts, then you create activity, you create like, dislike, don't care, you start creating discriminations, you've left equanimity behind somewhere, and now, through this struggle, you think you're going to be able to become victorious. You're going to come out a winner. But you can only be the loser because your mind is struggling with your mind. Who's struggling with who? Who's the I struggling with the thoughts? So it's the ego grasping, ego cherishing, that's struggling with the thoughts, but the thoughts are you and the ego's you. And so now you're struggling with yourself, but it seems actually quite interesting. You know, this wrestling and this struggling, and, you know, meditation's becoming really interesting, or meditation's becoming disturbing, or meditation's becoming boring, or meditation's becoming exhausting, because I get off the cushion and I feel like I've been in a wrestling match. So what you're asked to do in enlightenment meditation is just to sit. But you know, we're educated Westerners. We'd rather bring something to it, because just sitting seems too easy. Just to sit. So we'll have to bring our education with us. What we know. what we've been shown or what we've been taught. So we can't just be the observer, we start to judge. We can't accept, we have to have discrimination and then decide what's good or bad within meditation. So what we're being asked to do in meditation is not to judge, not to be judgmental. But when we bring our education into it, we're judging. Then, whatever arises in the mind, we're observing. We're being encouraged to not grasp, to not hold on to whatever arises in the mind. So when what arises is normally labeled as good or bad, we now don't label good or bad, it's just an arisal of something that we then choose to release and to let go. We simply acknowledge whatever's arising as thinking, without the drama that goes along with right or wrong. We let the thoughts come and go. And the example is, if you're going to touch a bubble with a feather, you'd have to touch it very softly in order for the bubble not to burst. So, your touch needs to be very soft, not creating a big drama in the mind that, oh, what's a terrible thought, I shouldn't have that sort of thought in the meditation. You have to touch everything very softly, as if you're touching the bubble with the feather. Just lightly see it for what it is, let it go, release it. So you keep repeating that over and over, this straightforward discipline to stop struggling, to discover a fresh, unbiased state of being, to be unbiased. Because when you're biased, you're leaning to the left or you're leaning to the right. It means you've already made a judgment on what's best for you. Who made that judgment? The ego. What did the ego base that judgment on? Ignorance. Where did that judgment come from? The past experiences. What were your past experiences? Samsara. Means you're judging everything from the past experience of samsara, but you want to get out of samsara. But you're using samsara as your reference point, because samsara, ego, now I decide what to do, which will ensure I stay within samsara, and we just continue the struggle. On and on. So the experience of certain feelings can feel very full with the desire for resolution. So if we have loneliness, boredom, anxiety, when we experience these on the cushion, they can feel very full, as if they're really taking over, and then I really need to do something about it. So unless you can relax with those feelings and sit with those feelings, it feels very hard to stay in the middle way, because the boredom takes over, or the loneliness takes over, or the anxiety takes over. So the loneliness, what do? I go on the internet, Facebook. I've got so many friends. I'll contact one of my friends. Not real friends, they're cyber friends. Boredom. I'll do something. Take me away from the boredom. Anxiety. I need to have faith in something. So what can I have faith in? A friend, mother, There's something that we go to in order to have less anxiety. So I think I told you when I started one retreat, I think it was the 3-year retreat, after some time I felt incredibly bored. It was Lamrim, so all the teachings, of the Buddha in the Lamrim. And I'd already done 1-year retreat, and here I'm doing 3 years retreat, and I'm doing the same subjects over and over and over. And at some point, I thought, this is so boring. I need to do something exciting. I need to do something because I'm bored. And I had a book by Chogyam Trungpa, and I opened the book, and it says, if you're bored, you're on the edge of enlightenment. I thought, great. You want to distract yourself, but don't. Because boredom means you're asking the mind to change. And so the message that pops up is, I'm really bored. I need to do something samsaric. And by doing something samsaric, I'll resolve the boredom. But just recreating samsara. You understand? So it's a mismessage, It's a wrong message that's coming up and saying, do something. Create some havoc, create some drama, and then you won't be bored anymore. Loneliness. We're all alone. We're born alone, we die alone, we are alone. We're all alone. But Lama Zopa says, countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas around you. If you could only see them, you'd be in a crowd. They're there with you, but you just can't see them. But actually, we've got to be comfortable with being alone within our skin, within ourselves, not to need somebody, not to want somebody. Because then when they're not there for us, we feel even more lonely, we feel rejected, and we feel lost. So loneliness in society is now a problem, boredom's a problem. So, kids now, I don't know if they experience boredom, because the minute they're bored, they have a device. There is no boredom anymore. But I think there is. I think there's boredom within the device. It's just they don't notice the boredom. They're bringing the boredom into the Facebook, into whatever the games are. They get lost in the games. But still, the driving force is loneliness, boredom, these sort of things. So still, when kids are young, the teenagers, they want to resolve these things with the device. When we get older, we want to resolve these things with, and that's what you need to investigate. What's your go-to when you're lonely, when you're bored, when you're anxious? What's your go-to? Don't go to it, because that's moving left or right. You're trying to resolve the problem. Sit. Just sit for 10 or 15 minutes. Experience the feeling, and with that experience, learn something from it. What information is it giving you? Don't reject it. Don't run away from it. Just sit with it. What's the information? What's it telling you? Don't look for victory or defeat. Don't look for praise or blame. Just sit and take the information. So, an example could be when you're in a relationship, a friendship or a relationship, and they give you up, they leave you. There's a raw discomfort, a raw pain. And we don't want to be with that raw discomfort. We don't want to be with that pain. So then we create the existence of the victim. Poor me. I'm the hapless victim. They did this to me. It's a terrible thing that they did to me. Then you tell all your friends. what a terrible person that is, virtually saying what a good person I am because I'm the victim. I did nothing wrong. So we're avoiding the rawness, the pain, by acting out and righteously telling how the other person messed up. We want to cover the pain in one way or another by identifying with victory or victimhood. We're either the victim or victorious. We're not allowing ourselves to be in the middle, balanced in equanimity, which is our enlightenment. Without the reference point, you're creating a reference. Victim, bad person, who let me down, who hurt me, who took the dog, who took the money, who took the house, or who took my feelings, who wasted my life, etc. So look how we do that. And in this world now, in America, I think it's 50 or 60% end up divorcing. 50 or 60%. So it means quite quickly you could become a victim. If you get into a relationship, you can become a victim. And you can live your life like that. So husband number one, or wife number one, number two, number three, number four, victim, 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 victim. Keep recreating the same situation to avoid the pain and the suffering of being the victim. Losing a job, somebody close to you dying, a dog or a cat dying. This can all trigger this feeling of deep pain, deep sorrow. And in society, we're not told to stay with it, to sit with it. We're told avoid it. We're not allowed to grieve. You can wear your black suit one day and then that's it, it's over. But in Buddhism, we have 7 weeks of grieving. And scientists now say it takes about 7 weeks for you to start to come out of the grief. So in Buddhism, when somebody dies, every week we do puja for 7 weeks. So they die on Sunday, next Sunday we do puja, next week we do puja. We come together and we keep doing prayers and puja and pray that they may have good rebirth, human rebirth, that they will be happy. It helps you to overcome any negative feelings, but any attachment feelings, any grasping feelings, any anger, any hatred. So that by the end of the 7 weeks, it's over. They've been reborn, finished. I let go. So this is very skillful. Not to just deny the emotions, but to work with the emotions so that we learn the maximum amount we can about who and what we are and how we're responding to stressful situations. Whether we're choosing for the mind to become victim or whether we're choosing to become the victorious, but we're not choosing the middle way, which is going to bring us to enlightenment. And so we go to the Dharma Center, we do our prayers, we say we want to become enlightened, but we're taking the longest possible route because if I became enlightened, then what? I don't know what's going to happen to me. I could be all grey and sort of like Prozac and a bit boring, all that perfection and floating around in the air, benefiting all sentient beings. It sounds a bit odd. Because look at my life, all that drama. Then there'd be celestial angels or something. So I think we have to be careful that we don't get so attached to samsara that we're rejecting nirvana, enlightenment. We stick too much to the causes of samsara. And that when the loneliness, the anxiety, the boredom arises, that we don't too quickly try to resolve it by switching on the TV or the radio or calling somebody or picking up a book. But what's this telling me? What's the information that we can understand from this emotion? Not having a reference point, but the mind, the middle way, is the reference point, but without being a reference point. It's where we're residing without being attached to it. Okay, I think I have to stop there. Otherwise, too much. Any questions? Oh. Gossip group. Band?
No, I was talking about how I am a very definite problem solver. That's my
You're the editor.
yeah. Well, I'm making decisions, and because that hasn't flowed through to the rest of my life.
Right.
In my domestic life, it's almost as if like when you yeah. So it's
I felt there was a bigger story in there.
it's kind of meaningless. You go to the supermarket and you buy a packet of biscuits, and all of a sudden they give you 25% extra for no extra charge.
Right.
You get used to the bigger size, and then you pay more for it because you can't not have the smaller size.
Right. Right.
So in my family situation, I'm the decision maker. I was the only wage, and I made most of the decisions and that sort of thing. My girls now rely on me, but that becomes their method of operating. So I feel like I'm the person who makes all the decisions. So I'm sort of really saturated with that energy. Is sitting on the cushion the way to discern when in your life it's a meaningless, ego-driven, avoiding of samsara decision you're making,
Yeah.
the one that everyone needs you to make for the benefit of the family, to get stuff done. Floors still need mopping, shopping still needs to be done. So I don't know. I'm so into it. I don't know the difference between what's a made-up one and what's an ego one and what's a has to be done one.
Well, what has to be done is the house has to be kept clean. Shopping has to be done. But what you've done is trained everybody into thinking David makes the decisions. And now it's a nightmare. Because, Dad, shall we buy twisties or not?
It's only a nightmare that now I realise I don't want to do it anymore.
Right. But do they want to do it?
12, 3.
How old are they?
Oh, my wife's.
But you have children.
My daughter's 13.
She's going to have to make decisions. Because when she grows up, if she has a relationship, then the shopping, cleaning, cooking. What I see in the new generations is that the parents take so much responsibility that they don't actually train the kids to take decisions, to know where money comes from, how to spend money, how to be careful with money. It's that each generation wants their children to be even happier than they were, and so there's no training going on. From my mother's generation, she was in the war. And so coming from the war generation, there was this lack of food, the bombs coming down all the time, and so the anxiety and the stress and all that they had to deal with. And so what they passed on was a lot of stress, anxiety, that, but also a lot of respect for money, for food, for those basics. I was about 10, I think. I'd worked from when I was about 6, delivering newspapers. And I don't know if you remember things like the Sunday World, I think it was, these big newspapers on Sunday. And so the paper bag on Sunday was gigantic, And so I used to get on the bicycle, and the bicycle would fall. I'd go, ah! So I couldn't deliver on the bicycle. And in England, you had to put them in the box. You couldn't just do that. You had to walk up the pathway, put it in the box. So I'd done that from when I was about 6. Rain or shine, you had to deliver the newspaper. So sooner or later, I gave that up. And when I was about 10, I said to my father, I want a radio to listen to the top 20. And he said, oh, yes, I'll think about that. And then after a few days, he said, okay, I've got you a job. I said, I don't want a job, I want a radio. And he said, you're working at a delicatessen on Saturday, and I had to carry the pigs, the dead half-cut pigs, into the delicatessen, cut them up into bacon and ham and the cheeses and all this. And I did this, I think it was £1 for a whole day's work, but I was able to buy the radio. But he taught me the value of work and money. My concern now is that many of the young kids are not being taught money and value. And so if you take on all the responsibility of all the decisions, I don't think it's worry, but it's making the decisions, how to utilize the money, then when the kids grow up, they don't know how to do this, and so they get credit cards, borrow money, get themselves into debt, into problems, and then say, Dad, I've borrowed $100,000. I need help. So I think, one of the decisions perhaps to come to is that with your knowledge, how do you pass on your knowledge to your child? This is your responsibility, to teach your child how to be a good adult, a positive adult, in the sense of not getting into trouble with money. The basic things like making the beds and mopping the floors and stuff like this, I think if you live in a society, which a family is, there should be an awareness of these responsibilities and a sharing of the responsibilities. But again, many 13-year-olds or 15-year-olds or whatever don't want to make the bed, don't want to clean the room, but it has to become responsibility. She's good with this. Yeah. So give more support to your wife. She sounds like a sensible woman.
I was against it because the money being put on it. I just wanted my daughter to do it because she understood it right from the first.
Oh, forget it. if there's no money associated, she's not doing it.
There's a lot of things for a parent, she's a really nice girl.
Yeah.
But that never always seems to work out with the family the same way, does it?
It's just getting into the habit of doing it. You associate it with money in the beginning, and then after a while you sort of think, well, this is the thing I do. And then when you've grown up, you're not getting paid for it anymore. The husband or wife is not paying you to make the thing, but you have that habit of doing it. So I think your wife is a very sensible woman. Give her the decisions, and you just stick to you stick to work. let your wife deal with the crisps and the chips and all the rest of it. Wife is a very sensible woman. Yeah. No. Can you live in samsara without samsaric influence? Because the very basic underlying delusion is ignorance. You cannot listen without ignorance. Eh? On the couch? Couch? Who gets a couch? Which sort of luxury center is that? Couches. You see the luxury Dharma center with couches. Ignorance is sitting with ignorance. Ignorance is sitting with boredom. Where does the boredom come from? Ignorance. Loneliness, ignorance. You have this underlying ignorance, whether it's strongly manifest or weakly manifest, little manifest, depends on your practice. But until you have realization of emptiness, there is still delusion. There's still this underlying ignorance. By listening? No. You then have to actualize it. First you listen, because it points the finger in the right direction. So you know then whether you're taking your mind in the wrong direction, in the sense of, I thought what was going to enlighten me was activity. But then you hear, oh, but you need to sit on the cushion when you have these disturbing emotions, not keep running around, keeping yourself busy. Because you see, what can happen is, I remember this very good book by Chogyam Trungpa about cutting spiritual materialism. You can go from samsara and materialism to spiritual materialism. So you're a bit bored, you do some prayers. You're lonely, you go to a Dharma center. You give up, you renounce your clothes, your stuff, you start buying statues. And you decorate. So you can go from samsaric influences to Dharma influences, but you're still no better off. You know, maybe buying the painting, the Tanka painting, the Buddha painting is better karma, but still you're replacing one activity with another activity. It's still the influence of ignorance. So then when ignorance is saying, move, do something, buy something, you know, whatever it's pushing you into, stop, sit, become aware of the influence, and then you're more able to let go of the ignorance than recreate the ignorance. So until you have realization of emptiness, you're always going to be working with ignorance. And from ignorance come the 84,000 delusions. Madam. Yeah.
How do we make the distinction between thinking, oh, this action I'm thinking of taking is samsaric, and action just consists of having a life, because we're not all going to be monks and nuns.
Really?
So
You shock me. I thought by the end of this week you'd all be monks and nuns. You mean life decisions?
Yeah, how do we know when a decision is samsaric and when one's just like an action in life, like deciding to go on a holiday, might be seen as like a distraction for
Sure.
your problems, but also something
It is, yes. Is it good for others or is it good for me? A very simple way of sorting it out. Is it good for others? Is it going to be beneficial for others? Is it good for me? If it's good for me, forget it. If it's good for others in the sense of, I need a holiday in order to be the way I want to be with others, take the holiday. But if I need the retreat in order to be good for others, do the retreat. And so you start working with wisdom as opposed to ignorance, where ignorance would say, go on holiday, lie near the beach, you come back bright red, irritable because it rained, etc., etc. But I think just, is it beneficial for others or is it beneficial for me? When it's just about me, it's just about self-grasping, self-cherishing. Here I go again. Let's change the paradigm, change the DNA, and include more others. And then you're happier, more beneficial from the point of view of compassion, love, bodhicitta. Those are your operating systems. You see, what replaces ego? When you've let go of ego, when there is no ego, no ignorance, when there's no reference point, what moves you? What's going to be your fuel? Compassion, love, patience, tolerance, generosity, etc. These good qualities take over as the motivator, as opposed to the negative, which is the ignorance, which is about me. What can you give me? What can you do for me? When the compassion and the love takes over, you're still moving, you're still doing things, but different motivation. And the last question?
So, like, I was thinking about what you said about the further up you get, the lonelier you get.
Yeah.
Less like you.
Yeah.
So, people like Rinpoche, Lama Zopa, they don't have the need for
No. They have Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They have no ego. They have Buddhas and Bodhisattvas.
So they just want someone to have a cup of tea with.
Because it's good for you. Not because they need it.
They don't need company.
No. Chodron Rinpoche sat in the basement for 19 years in Lhasa pretending to be crazy and sick. He didn't need anybody. He just sat in the dark for 19 years. You think when he comes to New Zealand and has a cup of tea with you, he really has to have a chat with you because he's really lonely after sitting in the basement for 19 years in the dark? After that 19 years, he said, I must get out and talk to Dachin. Where is Dachin? He doesn't need you, but you need him. Often you get that feeling with Chodron Rinpoche that when he was teaching, and same with Lama Zopa, that it was like they were listening to Buddhas, giving them the teaching and then them passing it on. I always had that feeling with Chodron Rinpoche. I found very difficult to talk to, because his eyes were sort of always rolled up in his head and sort of looking up there, never seemed to be present. When I first met him, then he changed. After touring around the West quite a while, I think he realized that Westerners need eye contact, But in the beginning, he never looked at anybody. It's just always up there. And then I'd asked, I'll tell you a little story about Chodron Rinpoche, that Lama Zopa, I'd seen Lama Zopa in America, and Chodron Rinpoche was there, and I didn't particularly like Chodron Rinpoche because he never looked, he never connected. I just didn't feel connection with him. And so I asked Lama Zopa, which is my primary deity? So for days he checked divinations, and then he gave me the paper back with all these Buddha names crossed out, ticked, circled. Took days, to check for me, but he told me this one deity, because there's a saying in Tibet or in India, Indians practice one deity, realize all. Tibetans practice many and realize none. So I decided I wasn't going to be like the Tibetans. I was going to have one deity and become a Buddha, like that. So Lama Zopa told me this deity, but he said to me, you have to go to Chodron Rinpoche and ask him. No thanks. You have to go to Chodron Rinpoche. No, thank you very much. I don't need to. You're my teacher. I don't need to go. Yes, you need to go to Chodron Rinpoche. And write this down. So I had to write down the wording. Based on which deity, which Buddha, will I become enlightened in this lifetime? Is the wording. So I wrote this down, went to see Chodron Rinpoche, and he's sitting there, eyes up in the heavens, And I said to the translator, I need to ask a question, based on which deity will I become enlightened in this lifetime? And Chodron Rinpoche snapped to attention. His eyes came down. He laughed and laughed and laughed. And then he looked at me and he said, Haruka is very important in this degenerate age. And I thought, aha, he got it wrong. And he said, but for you. And then he gave me the same answer as Lama Zopa. So I thought, oh. Went back to Lama Zopa and I said, he told me the same answer. So no need to go and see Chodron Rinpoche. He said, yes, but how long did it take him? He said 2 minutes. He said it took me days. He was just showing something. Yeah. Okay, we're finished. On that powerful story. We'll just dedicate with Shantideva. What are you looking at me like that for? I just said we'll dedicate with Shantideva. Were you not listening? What? Oh, I see. It's like that, is it? More work when I think I finish work. If you want to, but not necessary.